Okay, I'd like to give some examples of making a gesture drawing. First off, notice how the paper is set up horizontal, so that as we go through today's exercises, I can draw several figures across the page in this format. I've got my source images clipped onto the drawing here on the upper left corner. For you, I would advise setting up your computer screen or your tablet off to the left side if you are right-handed. And if you're a left-handed artist, set up your image to the other side so that you can look openly over the front of your body and not look over the drawing arm. So the first thing we do when we make a gesture drawing, we want to think about holding the pencil properly. So hold it on the back half of the pencil, not on the tip like we're writing. Hold it on the back half so that we can capture the big movements of the whole figure. And I like to look for what I would consider to be a primary gesture line through the whole pose. That would be if I have to represent this figure with one abstract sweeping movement of line through the whole pose, what would that be? And I pick this S-curve line because I see the torso curving this way, and then I see the back leg where his weight is curving the opposite way. So the back of the calf curves the opposite way. So we have essentially an S-curve movement through the figure. That's always a strategic line to build your pose on. So this line runs through the center of the figure mostly and out, exiting out into the weight-bearing leg or the stand leg. Now, other appraisals of the pose simply have to do with responding in a subconscious manner without thinking too literally about what we're doing. We want to be real fluid and loose. But one thing we're not doing is we are not trying to outline the figure. We're trying to capture a sense of movement in the pose. And we want to ask ourselves what specifically is moving here. Because if this pose just describes a standing figure, maybe he's walking, but it also describes a figure who's evenly balanced on one leg, the front leg. What exactly is making the movement? Now, I often repeat my gestural appraisals of forms many times, so I end up with a very scribbly, fluid, sort of wind-swept drawing that appraises the whole pose, the spirit of the pose. And ultimately, it starts to imply the outline of the figure without literally outlining the body. So resist the temptation to outline the pose, the figure. But if we just have a few minutes of time to make a gesture drawing, a gestural study of the pose, then something like this is totally successful and totally adequate for our needs. And what we want to think about is, does it capture the spirit of the pose? Does it capture the proportions of the body? Do things feel like they're falling in the correct place? At the correct angle, for example? Do we feel like the posture is there, the weight balance? And so the gesture is a chance for us to appraise these kind of feelings. Let's do another drawing together. The first drawing was by Raphael, and now we're doing a drawing by Charles Bargue, B-A-R-G-U-E, Charles Bargue, who was a French academic. He was an artist and a teacher, and made these drawings for his students to copy from in the 19th century. So once again, let's think about what the primary gesture line could be in this pose. It's often found moving through the center line of the body. So in this pose, the midline of the front of the torso. In the previous pose, possibly the spine was the indicator for the primary gesture line. But here we can start with the center line of the body and we can exit out the back leg. And there we find another S-curve. And I might look for other movements to build the pose upon. So secondary gesture lines, sweeping through the front leg, thinking about what the arms are doing as a totality all the way through the pose. See this S-curve rhythm. This curves up, this curves down. So we have a horizontal S-curve. The curve of the front of the head moving and connecting to the curve of the hip. See this S-curve connection. I might use the curves described by the torso itself as a way to build the pose. But the bottom line is keep your arm moving. Draw with the entire arm. As you can see, the way I'm holding the pencil helps ensure that I do draw with the entire arm. I'm going to move the camera just a little bit for you. You can see that the head was sort of a late addition to the drawing, as it should be. We don't want to start with the head. We want to build our gesture on what the torso is doing. So if I'm just making a quick gesture drawing of this pose, I don't need to do much more than this. It can be messy and abstract, but it should have a lot of movement, a lot of fluidity. It should be a good appraisal about proportion. Do I feel like the legs are the correct length relative to the head? Do I feel like things are falling in the right place in space? Have I used gesture lines for the feet? That's a big piece of advice that I offer is use gesture lines for the feet, and they will really help describe whether the legs that you've implied are the correct length or not. And if they feel too short, as they often do, just make a correction and do it now. Do it early on in the drawing. The gesture is the first phase of the drawing. The spirit of the pose is our first phase of the drawing. And so if we can get the big parameters of the drawing in place now, we save ourselves a lot of trouble later on, and we're just much happier as we work through the whole pose. Okay, thanks very much.